had a pleasure to work with Ieva once. I'm happy to see that Ieva feel like she was lucky to work with the teams and organizations that come from different industries and contexts. And I know exactly what Ieva means when she says it. So some of those organizations just started their discovery in the Agile world, discovering Agile ways of working. And some are rather mature Agile organizations that need someone to reassess their habits and reinforce the switch towards better practices. So currently, Ieva, together with her team of Agile experts at agilecoach.lt, the team, helps teams and businesses to choose the best next step in their Agile journey. Ieva, ready when you are.
Thank you, Laimonas. Thank you for having me here. Let me just share my screen. And let me know when you can see it.
Yes, all good. Go ahead.
Perfect. So yeah, once again, thank you for having me here. Hello to everyone who's joined on this track. I hope that everyone can find at least a little bit of something for themselves in my today's talk. So first of all, a couple of words about me, a couple of more words about me to add on what Laimon has just shared. I honestly tried really hard to find one good picture that more or less could summarize me as a person. Spent 2 hours, couldn't do it, so I'm down to 3 now. I can actually relate a little bit to what Paulus was saying because I spend a lot of time on the water as well, even though the tools are a little bit different, and I haven't broken any boards yet, so I guess I'm not that extreme. But yeah, I could relate a lot to what Paulus was sharing there, and very great speech, by the way. So yeah, these 3 pictures probably summarize my current me. So this represents really where I find my peace. I love traveling with people I love. I like exploring new places. I love exercising, fighting my fears. Overcoming my fears is a big part of what I do on the water. Unlocking new skills, learning new tricks. That's all very, very exciting for me and really helping me to find my inner peace. And when I don't do this, I coach teams and organizations. So during my professional career, I've been in the role of project manager, scrum master, product owner, well, eventually agile coach and trainer, and currently with the team of, with amazing team of agile practitioners from agilecoach.lt, which is, by the way, the team of multi-skilled practitioners. And we believe very much in the organizations that can be successful. We believe in the organizations that can achieve their business goals. We believe in the organizations that are fun places and exciting places to work in. So with this team, we are happy to be part of the changes and help one way or another contribute to the success and growth of that type of organizations. So during my career as Agile coach, I've worked with, many different company profiles. And based on my experiences, I divided them into 3 categories. So the first one is what I call Agile beginners. So these are the organizations that are just taking the first steps, right? So they are, you'd see those organizations basically learning a lot of new things for them, like what are the key Agile values and principles, why they are important and can be ignored. What's a cross-functional team? How does it work? How can it work at all? How do we come up with a backlog? What that is? How do we prioritize? How does that work? What is the MVP? What are these things that people call sprints and all these, basic agile stuff? So yeah, you'd see these organizations learning how to talk, basically aligning and establishing the common language between the teams, and basically learning to take the first steps in their agile journeys, right? So I'm not going to talk about these today. The second group is what I called, and again, this is my experience, that's not official categorization, but just my way of describing organizations that I worked with. So what I call practitioners. Practitioners is basically, well, these are the teams that are taking all the things that they learned in practice, basically playing with all the different agile toys in the sandbox, right? So they experiment to establish new ways of works. They're piloting with cross-functional teams, usually in some isolated areas in the organization, looking for the opportunities to scale that and replicate that on the other parts of the organizations, or at least the practices that are proven to be good for them. You'd see a lot of aha moments there. You'd see a lot of quick wins, also a lot of failed experiences and experiments, which is fine because you learn from it and you move forward, right? You take another step, and you're young and you're ambitious, so you want to take the next step. It's a little bit chaotic. You will not find all the happy people there. Someone will be a little bit maybe resistant at some points, right? But it's also very exciting change to be experiencing. But I'm not going to talk about this type here today as well. So the third group is what I call experienced users. Here you'd see organizations that could be described as young professionals, in my view. They have solid knowledge, eager mind for innovation. They have muscles, right, as hard skills that helps them to move forward. And of course, they have this value system already settled down. They have some kind of culture already settled in the organization. So this is the type I'd like to focus on today and share my recent combined experience from 4 different clients I worked with that I could say fall under this category. And what describes them is basically they're all digital product organizations, usually startups. They're currently growing, some even rapidly growing. They already has cross-functional product feature teams that are in most cases really owning that product or that feature. That means that, from zero to really little hard dependencies on other teams. These teams have product owners or product managers. They already work in sprints or some Kanban approaches with, like weekly plannings or other cadence plannings. They organize their work and prioritize backlogs, and they don't question those practices, right? And most importantly, they are capable to release at least once a sprint. Right? So this is really young, ambitious, professional adult. And usually why we end up working up with these organizations was sometimes they need some of the reinforcement to review their practices, reassess some practices or habits, and maybe have an advice what needs to be twisted a little bit or what needs to be implemented for them move even faster. And once again, please note that this is combined experience. So this means that the things that I'll share are not necessarily all found in all individual cases, but as a pattern, majority repeats case by case. So what I usually hear when I joined what I heard, right? These four organizations, I heard that, well, usually the things that they say is it's hard to understand capacity. We are estimating in story points, teams are tracking velocity, but we are struggling big time to have close to reality roadmaps or define goals for, you know, even upcoming quarters. Sometimes quarterly planning is so painful, it can take up to a few weeks, even up to 1 month to plan for next quarter, right? And even then, at the end of the quarter, the goals are not even half achieved. So it's, you know, a big time invested into some planning, which turned out to be only half realistic. It's hard to understand the big picture for them. That's what I usually hear. It's really, really hard to, you know, get that combined understanding where we are daily. Another one, challenging to scale, and that involves teams and product or domain knowledge, practices across teams. And usually that is followed by another complaint, which sounds something like lack of ownership in some teams, scattered focus, hard to agree on sprint goals, uniting sprint goals, because there are so many things that teams are doing during the sprint. And there's more, of course, case by case. I just mentioned, you know, the most common ones that more or less repeated in every product organization. So basically, the general feeling is that we as organization are doing kind of okay-ish. We're a successful organization, we're growing rapidly, but something just doesn't seem right. Right? Something is fishy. And we need someone from the outside to kind of help us, advise us what that can be, right? Now, before I go into the next slide of things that I noticed myself when I joined those organizations, it is important to mention that, well, each of these things that I just mentioned here, well, they need to be carefully reviewed and understood why that happens. Is that even a problem, right? Those needs to be prioritized. So it's not, you know, simple mix and match situation here. But I'll try to share some of the things that I noticed in most of the organizations, and then I'll tell you how we try to solve those. So I tried to kind of group these things that I noticed that I call habits here, or ways basic Scrum principles were adapted in the organizations. I grouped them into two categories. And the first category, I called it odd product owner setup. When I started to learn about, okay, so what product owners are doing and what product owners are not doing, it's, you know, my eyebrows sometimes just went up a little bit, and that, you know, you listen carefully because that's something doesn't seem quite right there. So I found product owners in most of the cases that are given the accountability for team effectiveness. I've found the product owners who are driving team improvements, who are daily challenging and guiding developers on their working principles. I found product owners who are looking for the ways, you know, how to improve the whole framework and all the habits in the team. I found product owners who are facilitating all of the Scrum events, removing blockers for the team. So basically, taking some of the Scrum Master, if not all, Scrum Master responsibilities, right? And then I see them even defining detailed solution and then driving the detailed planning around it. Even creating tasks, assigning those tasks to the developers, and then, you know, making sure that they are progressing as it was planned, actively participating in daily scrums and so on. So basically taking some of the developers' responsibilities there as well. But when you ask the teams, for example, okay, so what's your product vision? How do you track business value? What's your time to market? Do you track cost of delay? Do you have any experiment canvases? How do you define your experiments? They start to look at you and they don't know what you're talking about, because these things are in most cases not there, or they are written somewhere and forgotten and never really discussed with the team. And then on the other side, on the other group of common habits that I've noticed is, well, I called this group Task Factory. So here you'd find things that like product backlog usually consists of individual tasks, for example. And during planning, you would see 30, 40 items being pulled from the product backlog into the sprint backlog. And then, of course, it is close to impossible to come up with a uniting sprint goal. And of course, it's hard to understand priorities during the sprint, because when all these tasks start moving through the board, then you're totally lost, because you have 40 tickets somewhere scattered across the board. And then you would also see these things like things being added during the sprint, a lot of unplanned work, which is, well, not always necessarily needs to be done right away. But it's very hard to notice it because there's so many tickets out there in the sprint backlog. Things continuously spilling over from one sprint to another. And then one of my favorites, prioritization, often, not always, but in some of the cases, driven by this strong belief that we need to keep people busy. So we need to prioritize, so everyone is busy during the sprint. And I've even seen these kind of metrics like story points per person, like individual velocity, and then based on that individual velocity, we prioritize for next sprint. And well, yeah, basically the priorities is driven by that individual velocity. So for me, these things are, well, kind of a red flags that are popping in my head. And again, this needs to be carefully assessed and understood why they are the way they are in the first place. Maybe it does make sense. But in my experience, in those 4 organizations, usually it didn't make any sense. And there were things that we tried to experiment with, to really, move away from these habits and kind of try to solve all of the complaints that organizations had in the first place. So in most of the cases, we came down to these as I call quick fixes or low-hanging fruits. And why I call them low-hanging fruits, because those are really not too difficult changes, and they don't require too much of the investment in most of the cases. And at the same time, these are the things that are described as basic agile practices. So teams might already know about them, or might even have tried them at some point, right? So first, defining and aligning on clear product vision, clear to the team, clear to the stakeholders, simple elevator pitch format could be the good starters for the discussion. And discussion is really important here because it's not the fact that you have it written, but the fact that you discussed it is what gets you aligned on the vision. And then the second one is what I called conjuring, because I'm a big horror movies fan, but also because you really need to do that if you want your product owner to focus on product management activities. You need to separate Scrum Master and product owner role there. Product ownership is not an easy task to do. There's a lot of things, and if you want your product owner to be driven by the by value, if you want your product owner to be calculating cost of the delay, defining product experiments and opportunities, driving all the discovery activities, using all the good design thinking practices, you need to focus product owner on product owner activities. Simple as that. So it's a full-time job as a product owner. And if you mix and match that with the Scrum Master activities, then probably, both team and product can be, well, their well-being can be jeopardized a little bit if one person is taking care of both. So best option, of course, is to hire experienced Scrum Master that can really drive team effectiveness and take care of not only one, but maybe a few teams at once. But if that's not an option, then look into possibility who can take on Scrum Master role, maybe a team lead, maybe someone from the team can act as a Scrum Master. If that is not an option, you can also try maybe rotate the role. I've seen that happening as well, and we tried that with one of those clients. It really helped to teach ownership for the team as well, because, well, they all got to be Scrum Masters, so they know what it means. That's why they became a little bit more active and more engaged in the team. Also, rethink the ways you define your product backlog, especially if you do that currently in tasks. Consider stories versus tasks. Just come back to them, understand the purpose of them. Stories help to unite team on joint goals, and they help to align team on purpose, on what problems we're solving and why, and what users we are addressing now. It helps the team to focus on end-to-end solution rather than individual tasks. So that's, again, one big step and the ownership part. And of course, the definition of done. It helps teams to, again, understand the end-to-end solution and not focus on some individual small task of them. And my few advices on definition of done, have a realistic one at first, and also identify what you'd like to become better over time, and continuously come back to it during retrospectives. And yeah, the last one, dedicate time for innovation, of course. How to do that? Have enablers as stories in your backlog as well. Just dedicate time for these, technical depth or some innovation enablers. And if you have a lot of things being thrown at you during the sprint, all of the bug fixes and operational things, have some kind of work in progress limits there, so you can really limit that flow, and that will get you in a position where you need to prioritize. You need to reassess the value of the things that we are doing, and maybe really put some of the items that are running at you during the sprint, unplanned tasks. It can help you to put them into the backlog and define them as enablers with proper value definition, and then prioritize it. And yeah, because not all bugs need to be solved right away or ever, right? So my advice would be, come back to the basics just once in a while. Read the Scrum Guide, read the Agile Manifesto, and maybe some of the things, some of the Agile toys you ignored previously can really reinforce you now. So for the closing note, I'd like once again to raise this question. Can we ever outgrow basic Agile, right? Because, well, if you ask me, the fact that we are grown, that we're mature, it doesn't mean that we can't come back to the basics just to strengthen our basic skill set. Because I think that by any means, we never really leave childhood. It's only our sandbox that gets bigger. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ieva. We have one question, and it goes like this. I mean, you presented these definitions of, let's say, the practitioner and the experienced user and the beginner. To some of us, this sounded a bit subjective to assess, so we are in the need of help here a little bit. So the question from the audience is, how can we measure, if possible, of course, that a practitioner transitioned to a more experienced user? Or maybe how can we measure to help a practitioner to transition to more experienced user, knowing where they are in this journey?
Yeah, well, that's not a very easy question to answer because once again, those are my experiences, and from my experiences, companies that I worked with, I categorized them in my head. But how I tried to, you know, find that differences, you know, if you are just taking the first steps, if you're transitioning from, you know, we have the knowledge, now we want to experiment a little bit, we want to implement cross-functional teams, something works, something doesn't, we still need to prove something in our organization, we still need to engage leadership there, we're still working in a little bit silos there, like there's business and IT, you know, it's them and us. These kind of signals would tell me that probably you're not yet in that mature agile organization shoes, so to say.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Dear attendees, if you have more questions to Ieva and you haven't had the chance to ask the question today, you can find Ieva's contacts on agilecoach.lt, find Ieva on LinkedIn, even here on Whova. We still have plenty of time for conversations, Q&A sessions in our platform. Don't forget to provide feedback about Ieva's presentation. As always, the feedback is great for both the organizers and the speaker. And yeah, on behalf of Agile Lithuania community, Ieva, thank you very much for spending this half an hour with us.
Thank you.